Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth and final workshop of our mentor program. I am so sad that this is our final workshop, but I'm so excited for you all to jump into this final workshop. We've got a lot to cover this evening. We've got an amazing guest speaker for you this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Now, this workshop is all about how to make the most out of that first internship. How do you make the most of that first internship or first job? Maybe you're jumping into a full-time job, you're a senior, you're graduating. Maybe you're hopefully jumping into an internship. Even if you're not jumping into an internship, maybe you're working on a part-time job that you want to make the most out of for the summer. That's okay too. This workshop is all about how can you make the most out of that first opportunity over the summer so that you can really set yourself apart. By the way, if you have a part-time job and you don't have an internship, there are plenty of ways that you can go about setting yourself apart in that part-time job that could lead to internships down the road. Seriously, do not settle and do not sell yourself short for the network that you could create from any particular opportunity. I know that I could tell you that back in the day when I was a server and bartender, I met plenty of people that ultimately opened up doors for opportunities that I ended up taking advantage of later. You never know who you will meet, even in the jobs you think are not your main thing. It's understandable, but leverage it. Don't ever write any potential connection off. So, as you all know, my name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. This workshop's going to be about 50 minutes long. Please ask any questions you have. If you have any questions in the comments section, as you all know, I'm gonna ask 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Your job is to answer them within 24 hours of this workshop going live. I don't necessarily know exactly what the questions are going to be. I always prompt them based on our guest speaker. Sometimes I'll slip in an intro question during this segment here. It just depends how I'm feeling for the day. So I'm so excited for you all to jump in, learn from our guest this evening. I'm so excited to learn your answers to the questions that we ask you, and I'm so excited to engage with you all. Now, I really want to set the expectations. As you all know, you're not going to get an internship handed to you on a silver platter. That's just not how this program works. Now, by the way, have students landed opportunities at Google, major investment banks, major engineering firms, major marketing firms? Absolutely. Happens all the time. And have they done that as a result of meeting with their mentor, taking advantage of the things that they've learned through this program? Yeah, absolutely. But if you think this is going to get handed to you on a silver platter, I think you already know by now that's just not how this program works. You have to work for the things that you get. Now, this platform can be a springboard for you to get to where you want to be. Leverage this as an opportunity to really launch your early career path. Absolutely, yes. This is something that can really do make a huge impact on you getting to where you want to be. But this is not a handout. This is not something that is just given to you. This program could be critical to you really setting yourself apart compared to your peers. Take advantage of it. I really think that you're going to enjoy what we have to say in this workshop this evening. Now, I really want to talk about the intentionality of feelings, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, how you make someone feel in a given moment is going to really impact how they feel about you down the line. So I want you to just take a quick moment on a piece of paper or on your phone. I want you to identify, how do you want other people to feel about you? So when you're going into that first job, that first internship, that first part-time job, how do you want your boss? How do you want your colleagues? How do you want your peers? How do you want other people to feel about you? Write it in the comment section. Write it down on a piece of paper. I want to know, how do you want other people to feel about you? Because that intentionality is so key. It is so key, because here's the thing. If you don't write this down, if you don't set out an intention for how you want other people to feel about you, they are going to perceive you in any which way that you may feel on that given day. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. If you're having an off day and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, I'm having a rough day, you can let that spew on other people. It happens all the time. And people come up with excuses for it. You might say, hey, my dog died earlier today, or I just found out my grandma's got cancer, having a rough day. And don't get me wrong, there's not an excuse for having a rough day, but you've got to be able to realize that as a professional, you've got to put on multiple different hats to get yourself in the zone to make the most out of it. So no matter what's going on with your world, you can't let your personal world affect your business world. And if you do, it's going to potentially negatively impact the way that other people feel about you. But if you set an intention right now about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself in a much better situation. If you think to yourself, I want people to think about me as dependable and reliable and someone that's always upbeat, confident, and excited when it comes to work. It doesn't matter what's going on with your outside world. Even if the worst thing could have possibly happened in your outside personal world, if you set yourself an intention right now that that's how you want other people to feel about you, when you come into work, you're going to straighten yourself up because you've already identified, I don't want people to feel sad, bad, or like that I'm a charity case because I've got other things going on in my outside world. You want other people to feel like you are a rock, that you are someone that they can go to, that you are someone that's always showing up professionally. Boom. You will get yourself into the mindset ready to be successful. Now that leads to the 3 keys that we cover in every workshop for success in this mentor program, which is strategy, story, and state. And as I just said, it doesn't matter what's going on in your outside world. It doesn't matter what the state of the world is. If you are a rock, if you are someone that physically comes into a state conducive for being successful every single time, you will be successful. I promise you that. So what I want to do right now is I want to get you into a state conducive for being successful. I want you to stand up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to shimmy it out. I want you to let it go. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 30, scream 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You're getting yourself pumping. You're getting blood flowing to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself ready to be successful. The reason why that is so key is because no matter what is going on in your world, you can drive your emotions with your motions. Your motions drive your emotions, meaning that if you get out, you move, you do a power pose, you get crazy, you can get yourself in a state conducive for other people wanting to be around you. You can get yourself feeling good, even if you don't want to feel good. Even if you think to yourself, I just want to remorse for a little bit. I just want to be sad for a little bit. You can be sad on your own time, but when it comes to work time, you step your game up. And the way that you step your game up is you get your emotions and you turn them into positive emotions. I can tell you that right now. Even when you don't want to feel on your best self, your emotions can get yourself into an emotional state conducive for being successful, even if it's only for a temporary period of time. I promise you, your emotions, getting moving, getting running, getting going, getting just shaken out, will get yourself successful. And that will be a huge catalyst for you being successful on the job, standing apart from other people. Because everyone else is going to wonder, like, man, how are you able to stay upbeat, positive, just like a go-to person every single time while other people are taking sick days or just having off days? And you can tell, everyone can tell. It's because you are making an intention to be that way before you come into work every single day. It's critical. Now, the next key is your story. What's the story you tell yourself? Now, that's a big point of the intentionality. What is the story you tell yourself for why you're going to be successful? If you tell yourself a negative story like, hey, you know what? I don't deserve to be here. I'm not qualified. I'm just honestly, I don't even know why I'm in the room. If that's a story you tell yourself, that is the outcome that will be perceived by other people. But if you tell yourself a story, man, I can do this, I can make an impact, I can learn from these people, I can engage, I can be the energetic person who does what it takes, works the hardest to get to where I need to be. If you come in with that mentality, you can be successful. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are you going to do to make sure that you set yourself apart from your peers? Now, there's a few things that we talk about with our guest speaker, but there's a few things that I would love to discuss with you right now. The first one is what is focal is causal. This is popularized by the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini. Essentially, what it means is that whatever is seen is perceived, which means that it is all optics. By that, I mean, if your supervisor, if your boss, if your CEO sees you showing up early for work, working hard on projects, taking initiative, they will attribute the success of the entire intern team to you. But if they see you on your phone, on social media, doing something lazy, just doing things that are not, like spreading gossip at the water cooler, not working when you should be working, anything that could be perceived as negative, if they see that, they will perceive that just as likely as they do the hardworking stuff. So it is really critical that whatever people see about you, whoever you want to make sure that you impress, that they see the type of person that you want to portray, and that they do not see the type of person you do not want to portray. You will think to yourself, man, I wonder how does XYZ person get promoted over another person? I can tell you how. It's that they are seen doing good work while the other people are not seen doing good work. Make sure that you're seen doing good work. In fact, what I always find the most interesting about this research of Dr. Robert Cialdini is its extrapolation to other areas of life, specifically as, you know, I don't know if any of you all are holed up right now for coronavirus and sitting inside watching television, but what he's observed in his research is that when cameras, especially in police interrogations, are facing any particular person, whether that be the police officer or the suspect, when the camera is facing the person, one particular person, a jury is much more likely to attribute negative feelings towards that person if the camera is facing them. So if the camera is facing a suspect in an interrogation, the jury is much more likely to attribute guilt on the party of the suspect than they are to think that the cop is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually exist. However, flip it around. When the camera is facing the police officer, not the suspect, the likelihood that the jury is going to think that the cop, the police officer, is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually be essentially the guilt of the person who's under interrogation, it essentially increases substantially more. The point I'm trying to make is that when what people see is what they perceive. So at the end of the day, if God forbid you're ever in a police interrogation situation and you notice that the camera is rolling, at the best you want to make sure that the camera is side by side equally to you both, or not facing you and facing the police officer. It's crazy how much of an impact that has on how people perceive other people. But more importantly, as it pertains to the workplace, make sure that people see you doing good work and not see you doing bad work. It's not a tit for tat type of thing. One bad deed is about 10 good deeds worth. You have to really, really make sure that you're not seen doing anything bad, or you are going to be on the shit list of your supervisor. And that's not a place you want to be. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this theory called the next in line theory. Essentially what this says is that when somebody is talking or about to speak, their likelihood of retaining any information before or after their speech is very low. So if you know that your supervisor is about to give a presentation, or someone that you really look up to, maybe you are about to see a keynote speaker, you're thinking to yourself, I love this keynote speaker, I love what he or she has to say, I want to go up to him or her after their speech. Bad idea. Here's why. People, when they speak, are much more likely to think about what they just said if they just finished giving a speech, or what they're about to say if they're about to give a speech. Their likelihood of retaining any new information is very minimal. So therefore, you need to give the person you're trying to make a positive impression to a leeway period before you bring up new information to them, because that will increase the likelihood that your message is actually going to resonate in their mind. But if you come up to them right before a speech or right after a speech that they just gave or are about to give, their likelihood of remembering what you said, very low. So just something to keep in mind. This also applies to a boss who's giving a speech, any colleague that's giving a speech, anybody who's about to speak publicly for anything. Make sure you don't talk to them immediately before or afterwards, because they're not going to remember what you said. So the last thing that I want to touch on is this concept called matching and mirroring. This is a great key for building rapport in the workplace, especially for someone who's got negative body language. So I think we've touched on this before in the past, but you should not have your arms crossed when you're at the workplace. It conveys that you're closed off and that you're not open to learning new information. But there's a lot of people that have bad body language in the workplace. There's going to be a lot of people that will cross their arms to you. Can you cross back? The answer is yes. And I know this might sound crazy, but people feel a subconscious connection to others that they are similar to. And this can be in your mannerisms and your speed of speech. Not your dialect of speech, but your speed of speech. So if somebody has a very thick Southern accent and you try to emulate that Southern accent, but you don't actually have a Southern accent, they're going to sniff that out immediately. It's going to be perceived as inauthentic. But if someone's talking really quickly and you're saying, I'm going to work on that, boss, I'm going to make sure I get that done, I'm going to work on it right away, they're going to think to themselves like, man, here's a sense of urgency, someone who's really with it. That's awesome. But instead, if you respond by saying, yeah, boss, I will get to it, and I will make sure that I get those assignments complete, they're going to be thinking to themselves, what the heck is wrong with this kid? Like, what does he not like get it? The sense of urgency? It's crazy how your speed of speech is actually perceived so similar together. So if you notice that someone talks really quickly or really slowly, following their speed of speech, matching and mirroring their speed of speech can actually help you build rapport with them. The other key is other body language. So like I said, crossing your arms. If someone's playing with their chin, you can play with your chin. Don't try to be overly obvious about it, but you can do it subtly. So if someone's playing with their ear, you can play with your ear. And I know it may sound crazy, but you can try this with a friend who's never heard this before. Go up to them, see if they've got any mannerisms. Maybe they're using their hands like this a lot. Emulate those hand gestures, and then all of a sudden introduce a new gesture. All of a sudden, maybe start playing with your nose. It could be any gesture, honestly. Start playing with your nose. Do it. First, emulate their hand gestures for about 5 minutes. Then introduce a new gesture. Watch what happens. They're going to start playing with their nose. They're going to start emulating the new gesture that you have now introduced. It's crazy. It's fascinating how it works, but it builds rapport between other people in the work environment. I think those are some really critical tips for you to know. The last thing that I want to leave you with is the 30 and 90-day rule. The 30-day rule is for an internship. When you first get into an internship, this is, by the way, a Fortune 500 CEO taught me this tip. And that was, when you first go into an internship, meet with your supervisor and ask him or her the question, what did the best intern you ever have do to set themselves apart? On the very first day, ask that question. They're going to tell you exactly what they want you to do to set yourself apart. For the next 30 days, go ahead and do it. Don't complain. Don't ask questions. Don't share any professional goals you've got for yourself. Just go ahead, put your head down, work hard. After 30 days, you have built credibility with this person. You can then say, hey, boss, would you be open to having a conversation? I would love to share with you some of my professional goals. Boom. That's where you share some of your professional goals. That's where you say, hey, I'm interested in connecting with people in these areas or these types of fields or these types of industries. And because you've earned credibility, they will help you get there. Why? Because you've earned that credibility. But if on day one you ask for that and you've earned no credibility, they're not going to do it. Or if they do, they're going to only do it on a light version. You're not going to get the full force of how they could possibly help connect you. That is something that's really critical. 90-day rule is the exact same thing, but for a full-time job. You get a little bit longer to really build that credibility with your supervisor and your employer. So those are key tips. The last thing I want to just really mention is really starting to help you get into a routine. I know that the best way to learn anything is to actually teach it. So what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody. This could be a friend. It could be a peer. It could be a classmate. It could be anybody. Teach them something that you learned in this program. Teach them anything you learned in this program. We know that students who tell at least, we know that students who tell at least 20 people something that they learned in this program, that their likelihood of landing the job, the internship, getting into a graduate degree increases exponentially. We know that the more people a student tells, the more likely they're able to do that. What we've identified as 20 is that magic number. And this doesn't necessarily have to be you teaching them a full seminar of anything we taught. It could be literally you bringing up casually in conversation, like, hey, I learned about this thing called matching and mirroring. It's really fascinating. Boom, that's it. That's one person. Or multiple people if you're in a group. But what we've learned is that the more people you tell, the more likely you are actually going to retain this information, the more likely you are going to actually apply it into your professional life, and the more likely you are actually to achieve the goals you have set for yourself professionally. It's crazy how it works. It's a network effect. It really does make an impact. So I want to challenge you that after this workshop, you go out, you identify a friend, you teach them something you learned in this program, and its likelihood of sticking increases exponentially. I really want to challenge you to do that. This is our final workshop. I'm really excited for what you are able to accomplish over the summer. I would really encourage you to be in the program next semester. You're going to get a new mentor. We're going to have new speakers. We're going to talk about new content. I think you're going to really enjoy it and really springboard your career into another level. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of this workshop. I look forward to seeing you on the next part.
Everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to dive into our topic. Our topic is, how do we prepare for that first job or internship? And maybe you've already had an internship before. Maybe you already had a job before. But we're entering in this crazy, unparalleled time in human history where we're going through COVID, where maybe we're doing our job or our internship remotely. Maybe we're doing interviews remotely, but sometimes the work is hybrid, meaning we're sometimes in the office and sometimes not in the office. Maybe we're doing work in a very different way than we've ever really done work historically in human history. And it's a lot to deal with. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot to go through. But fortunately, we've got a great guest with us here this evening. We've got Russell Kofford. Russell is an experienced marketing and business development guru. He's got a demonstrated history of success in strategic planning, graphic design, and proposal writing skills. He's also great, strong information technology and professional skills that complement his marketing and business development style. Russell is currently the principal consultant and graphic designer for TRD Enterprises. Russell, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
So I know I just kind of gave a little bit of an intro for you, but I would love to start off with just you and how you got into your work and the work that you're doing today. Like, I'd love to, even start with at the basic level, your very first job or internship. How'd you get into that?
Oh man, my first job or internship. I mean, I started from the bottom. I started working at a print shop many years ago, and I did not know it was a passion of mine at the time. I just needed a job to pay bills for rent. It wasn't nearly as expensive to live in an apartment as it is now, but you still need to pay that bill. And so I started there, and I learned how to do some graphic design, some marketing, business development, and just moved on in my career, going from job to job really at that point, and moving through the ranks and finding I had a passion and a skill for marketing and business development that, my graphic design background kind of fed that, and it turned into a growth sector for me. And then I was, the business world's a scary place. There's lots of bad businesses. There's good businesses. There's good people at bad businesses. There's, all kinds of the whole spectrum. And I decided to, after a couple of years ago now, so I think it's been 18 months, that I was going to do it on my own and try to change the business world a little bit and make sure that firms were doing better work, dealing with their consultants better, dealing with their employees better, making better decisions in how they interact with people in the workplace. And so that's the impetus for me starting my company.
That's cool. That's really interesting. I love learning that progression there. I love to even break it down on the base level, because I bet there's a lot of students that are watching this right now and they're thinking to themselves, like, I would love to be an entrepreneur. I'd love to start my own business one day, but I don't know how, or don't know really what I would do. I think I want to go back to that very first job that you had where you were doing, was it graphic design?
Mm-hmm.
So when you were doing that graphic design, you mentioned that you then transitioned to business development and marketing, other components of the business. I would imagine that a big part of getting those opportunities and the responsibility was self-driven. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you always have to have, there's no self-made man. I mean, we can talk about that. Like, there's always people in your life that have guided you, mentored you, driven you to do different things. Some of them are family or friends or wives, girlfriends. Some of them are colleagues, coworkers, who knows? But, at that time it was really, again, it was just a job to start. But then I discovered I liked it, and I decided to just dive in and start learning something new for myself and figure those things out. And I met a bunch of people. Working at a print shop, you meet a lot of different types of businesses that come in to get their printing. And so it's you get an interesting cross section of business types. You're not stuck in the AEC community. You're not stuck with real estate. It's everybody. It's the homeowners associations. It's the architecture firm that needs business cards, or it's a real estate agent that needs tons of flyers, or it's promo products, and it's all this stuff. And so I met a lot of different types of businesses. I met a lot of business owners. Knowing business owners gives you a lot of insight into business. And so, that's kind of where I first discovered like how people do things, how they think, how they act via email, how they correspond with people. What they need for a business to run those things. And so knowing kind of those basic infrastructure needs that people have coming from the print side, I was able to, leverage that into another job with one of our clients. And I said, hey, I'll come do anything you want. I'll start in the mailroom, basically, and I'll come work and I'll prove my chops to you. And, before long, we're doing the marketing and business development, leading the thing for a new company rebranding, relying a lot on those graphic design skills I first had, but also the relationships, the business contacts, and the people that I met from my first professional job at the print shop.
That's really interesting. What I love about that story is the fact that you went from you took the initiative. I think there's a lot of students that are thinking to themselves like, okay, cool, I'm going to get into this job or this internship, and then it kind of is laid out for me. But I will tell you this, it's not like higher ed. Like in higher ed, you've got assignments. It's very clear. You've got a syllabus. You've got a set of when the tests are going to be. You've got midterms. It's very clearly laid out. But in business, it's not like that. It's kind of like if you kind of do the status quo, you're going to get treated like the status quo. But if you step up and take on extra projects because you're genuinely curious, you genuinely show an inquisitiveness, you are much more likely to get promoted. You're much more likely to get a raise. You're much more likely to get a bonus. You're much more likely to get opportunities because you showed that you cared. You showed that you really wanted to learn. And that's something that's so critical. And I think that you're showcasing that in your story, Russell, was that you could have, when you in your first job, you could have just been like, boom, I'm only doing graphic design. When they send me some work, I'll do it for them. And that's it. But you were willing to step up. And there wasn't necessarily a guarantee of more pay for the time that you were stepping up doing business development work. You just did it because you were genuinely wanting to take on the additional experiences. And I think if you're a student entering into your first job or internship, that's got to be a major part of your mentality when it comes to the work itself. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember some of the first interns we hired at an engineering firm we were at, and you could always tell which ones were going to come back next year or which ones were going to get a job offer, basically based on that very thing. People, they understand. I mean, your employers understand when they get an intern, it's an investment. You don't have the skill set right away. You don't have the talents. You may have some knowledge, but you don't have that experience. And so the ones that ask questions, that get in there and go above and beyond to be a part of the group, that take on more responsibility, ask for more things. And whether it's a new employee or an intern, it's the same thing. Those people get recognized faster. They're seen doing better work and they're seen to be actively engaged. Now, there is something to be said for you have to have a certain technical capability, but that can be learned. You know, most of those things can be taught, and it's really about your attitude, the way you want to approach your employers, your boss, your colleagues, your coworkers, and how well you engage with them and how inquisitive you are about learning the next step or what's the next path. In a lot of firms, especially in professional services, there's a path to principal. Everybody wants to eventually work from a worker bee all the way up to an owner of some kind or a shareholder or at least a higher end project manager. And, you know, if you don't ask about the next step, you may be stuck on the step you're on.
Ooh, you know, what I really love about what you just said there was, do you seem to be engaged? Do you seem to want to gain more information or responsibility or experiences? And it makes me think of a question of like, how important is it that you make a really positive impression to your boss or manager? Like, how critical is it that for you as a student or a young professional entering into your first job, like that your boss sees that you're genuinely curious? Like, how important is that, Russell?
I have a great example for that. I call it the sharpening pencils. We had some people that were being seen as lackadaisical, and they were doing great work. They were awesome at their job. Their colleagues loved them. The project management was great. However, they came into work, I think, 15 minutes late just about every day. And I said, hey, here's what you got to do. And the boss is seeing this. And regardless of the excellence, and they put in extra time at the end of the day, but regardless of this excellence they had, they were perceived as being a bad employee because they had this one minor tick. And I said, well, hey, I want you to come in every day 15 minutes early so you have time to sharpen pencils. I want you to go in, I want to sharpen 3 pencils, I want to set them on your desk, and I want you to go grab your boss and ask him how his day is. And I said, go in there and say, hey, how's your day going? I'm ready to work. What do we have on the schedule for today? And make sure he sees you there early every day. And he'll see you in the break room while you're sharpening your pencils. That'll be your signal, your own little trigger that I'm ready for the day. He never used pencils. He typed everything, right? But it was a trigger for him to know this is the perception. I need to be aware of the perception that my boss has. Do you need to impress them? Yes. Are you going to make mistakes? Are you going to have issues? Again, it's your first job. You're new somewhere. The impressing is not about your technical capabilities. A lot of people are really smart. It's about how you do your work, what you do, how you treat your people, that you work with your colleagues, and how you respond to criticism and education coming from your boss, your trainer. If you're not taking notes or they don't see you actively engage and actively listening and participating, they're going to let their boss know, or they're going to have a bad vibe. Even if you're retaining it, you need to make that effort to be perceived as retaining it. It's very important.
That's really cool. It makes me think of, there's this research done by a guy named Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he talks about this concept of what is focal is causal, which essentially just means that what people see, they perceive. And even though those people gave great work, the boss perceived them as being slacking because they came in late every single day. And I think that's so powerful when it comes to the work itself. And I loved the example you gave of like coming in and asking how their day is going. And I know that might seem like we're brown nosing or like we're trying to suck up to showcase that we're coming in to work on time, but it really is powerful. Like people want to see that you're doing the work and that you're doing positive things and powerful things. Because I mean, to this theory, like what is focal is causal. Like what people see, they perceive. And if they see you doing great work, they're going to have a much more positive relationship to that. The other thing I love that you said was them when someone's teaching you something, regardless of whether or not you already know that information, that doesn't matter. Your ability to communicate to them that you are retaining and internalizing this information is way more important than your actual ability to retain and internalize that information. And I know that might sound really strange to especially maybe some engineers that are watching this right now who are thinking like, okay, well, all that really matters is my grades. Like what, you know, and my ability to retain the information. What does it matter if my professor or the person teaching me this information thinks that I'm learning this information? It matters immensely because people like the way they feel. People love the idea of teaching people. People love the idea of like thinking that they made an impact on somebody else's life. And if you can give somebody that satisfaction, they are going to go to bat for you. But if you can't give somebody that satisfaction, they are going to feel like you're an idiot or that you're not paying attention or that you're slacking or that you just don't care.
Yeah, and in the absence of any other data, they're going to almost assume negatively every time. So you have to proactively provide that positive impact, because if they see nothing of you, they may not assume a base level. They may not assume that you're doing well. They'll likely assume that you are doing less well. You're new. I mean, I would expect the same.
So what can a student do going into their very first job or internship? What can they do to properly set that expectation?
You know, I always think, look around you. I mean, that's the first thing. I always say, look at the people around you and what they're doing. Who's excelling, who's enjoying their job, who enjoys the place they're at and seems to be doing really well. When you go into a first job, and this happens everywhere, whether it's your first job, your last job, whatever, imposter syndrome is totally a thing. I know it's not like a diagnosed disorder or whatever, but everybody gets it. They get in there like, I got this job because I was lucky. It's not because I'm skilled. It's not because I'm awesome. I got it because I was lucky and I don't deserve to be here. And we get this self-doubt about things. Well, when you're first going into a job and you want to set up your positive expectations, when you have this self-doubt, it's really hard. And so what we have to do is look externally at people and maybe say, okay, how well are they doing? Are they responding well to me? Do they talk to me? Do they smile? Do they look at me? Is my boss criticizing me all the time? You know, what's the expectation that I'm setting for myself first, and make sure that's a positive expectation, and then try to, again, make yourself perceived how you want to be. You know, they say dress for success. It's the same thing. You dress for the job you want, right? Well, set your mindset for how you want to be perceived. I want to be perceived as a positive, productive, inquisitive person at work. And so when you can get past that initial imposter and just realize I'm here to learn, I'm here to do a job. They got me here. They vetted me one way or another, whether it was automated, random lottery selection, whatever. You got into a pool somehow because somebody looked at your resume, they looked at your CV, they got a referral from your professor. You know, you were probably one of many people on the little handshake system they use for many of these schools to get in internships, right? Or jobs, and they picked you for a reason. So you just need to try to live up to that reason. And you're also trying to figure out if that firm is a good fit for you. You're there to learn about the firm and what they're doing. And so when you go into it, don't go in having so many expectations. You know, learn about what they do, how they act, how they react. I've been at jobs, everybody's done it. They've had terrible bosses. You know, sometimes it's not you. And that imposter syndrome can be, you can do the exact same thing at one job and at another job, and in one environment you succeed because of the environment. It's the only thing that's changed. And so getting over imposter syndrome and just realizing you're there to learn and be positive is the best thing you can do to set yourself up for success when you first get to a job.
I think that's awesome. I love that you brought up imposter syndrome. I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question real quick. When is the time that you felt imposter syndrome? Post in the comment section. What did you do about it? How'd you overcome it? What were you feeling insecure about, or that just you feel like you weren't adequate enough to be in a specific role? I'd love to learn about that circumstance and scenario. And Russell, I'd love to, because I would imagine that you've got probably a really fresh perspective about that imposter syndrome. I mean, you started your business 18 months ago. I would imagine as a new business owner, I know that I certainly felt this. That imposter syndrome is a very real feeling. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even feel it now. I feel a little bit more of a weight off my shoulders as a business owner than I did as an employee. I mean, I think a lot of that pressure, it comes from different places. You know, we might be perfectionists, we might be really smart, and we think we're smart, but then we get into a room of people that they're just as smart as we are. You know, oftentimes in our education, we can be the smartest person in a classroom. You get to a job where they're hiring people for their specific skill set and education. We're not the smartest person in the room, and we can't think about that anymore. And so, you know, translating that into my job, I felt actually or into my business, I felt a relief. I said, hey, I'm not going to need to pretend. Whatever I believe becomes my reality. Almost, you're not in these constraints. So, you know, counter to actually that situation where I had imposter syndrome when I started my new job, I knew I had a certain skill set, but there weren't any internal company expectations that I felt that I had to meet, or anybody else's criteria I had to live up to. You know, really it was about helping other people. And for me, it's a calling. And so it's more like, hey, this is what I need to do. It was, you know, I'm 40 years old now. I've had plenty of time in my career to figure out who I am and where I'm at. And I, you know, when I was working places, I couldn't get that. And so now that I've expanded, I can operate without worrying about what people think, and that changes a lot of that imposter syndrome. I mean, I check my appearance, I check my, you know, I mirror match with people. Like, I try to get involved, I remember their names, I do these kinds of things that you do to establish rapport with people, and I am good at that. And so I didn't really have an issue. I just do that on a regular basis and come across. Now, when somebody asks me what to do and I don't ask questions, this is where the big pitfall was for me. Is, hey, can you do this? Yes, of course you can. You know, I'm really good at stuff. I can always do something. But I didn't ask the questions I needed to get enough information to actually perform. And so I'm freaking out to some degree. Like, I've got to get this deliverable or this thing done. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I just said yes. And so, you know, again, we come back to that kind of inquisitive thing. Ask the right questions, ask for help, be proactive in your communication, and get past that, because that's where you overpromise and underdeliver. And, you know, less of imposter syndrome, but more of like wanting to be capable and seem on top of my game was the biggest struggle.
There's power in being the stupidest person in the room. And I
Of
know that
course.
sounds like a really crazy thing to say, but there is. I mean, if you're willing to ask the quote unquote, you know, stupid question, there is so much power in that, because you are the one that's going to get the answers that you want. I even think, like, it makes me think of like a Simon Sinek video when he was doing consulting, and he was like, hey, I know that I'm the late one into the game and I'm really slow here, but could you just reiterate a little bit about what this means and why it's happening? And what he ended up finding out was, like, half the board members had no idea what were going on, but because they had been referring to these acronyms and all these different things going on for so long, they felt uncomfortable asking for clarification. So I think there's some power in that, but I'd love to learn your thoughts. What's your advice for students that are afraid to fail?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, if you're a student and you're entering the workforce, you're expected to fail to some degree. The real question is, are you learning from those? And this applies from the student and job to the firm itself. Applying lessons learned. When you can say you have an issue or a challenge and we found a solution, and you can apply that knowledge to your next problem or avoid it completely, that's the best way to do it, right? You avoid those problems. You don't repeat your mistakes. The failure isn't a problem. It's the lack of learning from your mistakes and that failure and getting up and doing it again. If you become too afraid to actually get up and do it again and say, and ask those questions, again, we're going to come back. I made a mistake. I obviously didn't have clarity. Let's ask some questions about what I could have done, how I could have done this better. It's a learning opportunity for you. And if you don't embrace those and take them in and learn from them and make a foundation, you're doing yourself a disservice when you fail. It's really important that, and you can document these things to some degree. If there's a spectacular lessons learned, you get to a new firm and you've got a spectacular fail that you had, and you guys said, hey, we're really behind on schedule on this certain job. That's usually a common one. And you found a way to expedite the schedule, write that down. And then you can use that. For me, I use it in business development to sell the firm. Go to the people you want to work with, say, hey, we screwed up and we learned from it. And now we have a better process and a better mousetrap, and we can serve you better because of these mistakes we've made. As an employee, you could do the same thing. hey, I've made this mistake before. I've found a way around it. I can improve it. And when you go to your next job, you work in your next group, or even at that same job, you can come up in the project kickoff meeting and say, hey, we had this problem on a past job where I did this, and this was the issue, and this is how we resolved it. You can mitigate a lot of problems before they even become, and you can provide extra value to your employer through your failures.
Yeah, I think there's power in that. I also, I think there's a lot of power of when we've made mistakes, having rapport with other colleagues at work, because I think if we have that network, that support system, those sponsors there that are willing to support us through our mistakes, we can really overcome a lot of that. So I guess I'd love to know, in your experiences at working, building your company and building relationships, do you advocate for students to go out and build networks and relationships with other coworkers outside of their department?
With everybody. I mean, you never know if the barista giving you your coffee is going to be your next client, or if they're going to be the next person that's, they could be going to school for a job and they'll be ahead of you in no time. And if you don't know who they are or treat them well, and it's especially doubly true, of course, for the people in your organization. And I think you'll have people in your direct work group that you work with, and you're going to develop some rapport with them automatically. You're already going to know their name all the time. You're going to start taking on some of their mannerisms. You're going to be able to speak with them comfortably. But then you've got this whole group of people outside of that where you may not see them all the time. Make it a point to talk to them at the water cooler. Make it a point to remember their name, remember something about them. You always hear about active listening. Like a good example is you ask somebody, hey, what do you like to do? They say hiking, but you don't know anything about hiking. And so you're like, okay, well, where do you go to hike? They say, oh, well, we got to go about an hour down the road, right? And you're like, oh, the road trip. I love road tripping. That's, that would be the best part for me, is actually driving down there. Now you're not talking about hiking, but you're taking something that they have and you're kind of developing a conversation with it. And if you can establish rapport with multiple people in your organization, from the top to the bottom, never discount the people below you or to the side of you in your relationship, establish those. When you go to a new firm, they may be people, when they leave a firm, they may have something to bring to you. When they get promoted, they may have an opportunity to bring you onto their team or promote you as well. Always keep in touch with people. I mean, being nice to people, being kind to people, never hurt anybody. And you just never know what you're going to get out of it. So yeah, always try to do that. The one pitfall you want to watch out for is you do have to get your work done. Sometimes we get so excited about who we're talking to at work, we don't realize the perception that we might have when the boss sees us developing rapport at the water cooler with somebody outside of our department. And so you have to watch out for that perception. A great way to do that is maybe even ask them out to lunch. If you've got somebody that's outside your department, you've met them at the water cooler, you know their name, they have the same positive outlook, they're moving forward in their career, they're looking at things. Hey, can I buy you lunch? Let's go get something. Everybody loves a free lunch. And then you have a chance to really spend some quality time with people. You get some FaceTime or some seat time with them. Invite a few friends, or colleagues from work, and go out together and spend some time with them. And then you'll find those colleagues stick with you for years. 20 years later, they'll be a city manager. You'll be a private consultant. You'll be a project manager, and you're still going to connect with them. You're still going to go golfing with them. You're still going to see them, and it'll surprise you.
That's interesting. I feel like there's a shift in the guard right now. I mean, I think definitely there was a potentially in the past, maybe that older school mentality of like, oh, if I see people chatting by the water cooler, they must not be working or they must not be productive. But I've seen some CEOs literally pay if they got coworkers that are going to go get lunch together, the CEO will be like, I got lunch, you go hang out, because I'm trying to stimulate as much interaction as I can between my coworkers as possible. Are you starting to see that transition as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. The problem is I've noticed, and I've seen that 100%, especially with the hybrid work model. We now know that people are working at home when they're done. They're working weird hours. They're extending their hours. They're shrinking their hours. They're working on projects, and so that becomes less of an issue to be seen not doing anything. I mean, you still have to stay off your phone at work. You can't be doing that. You can't be playing solitaire, but you have a good employer when they encourage that kind of behavior. When they're the ones willing to take you out, they don't necessarily need to go themselves. They give you some leeway. The hour lunch, I think that should or the half-hour lunch, whatever, should just die. Come back when you're done, do your work, don't miss your meetings. We're all adults. And I think a lot of employers are treating adults as adults. We're all over 20 when we get out of college. We're we're becoming adults, and we need to develop that level of responsibility. And the employers are now giving people a little more responsibility in how they accomplish their work. But you never know what somebody else has in terms of performance. And so when your boss comes down and says, hey, stop doing that, that is an old school mentality, but we also never know what somebody else's shoes are. So it's just being cognizant of that. And if you have an employer that's willing to encourage that, have ping pong tournaments, have after work socials, have a beanbag couch downstairs where, hey, we've created a space for people to socialize. Take that opportunity, go down and socialize with your people. They've provided that because they want to establish that camaraderie. They want to find some diversity and take the diversity in the group and like meld it together so that they're benefiting from that.
So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really cool. It's just kind of sussing out what the culture is like and what is conducive or not conducive to making a positive impact in the eyes of a boss or a leader. But in another note, what about my own professional progression? Like if I'm a student, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, actually, maybe I want to pause for a second. I want to ask the students a question. Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn, what is the type of culture you would be interested in pursuing? Is it like a totally remote environment, or is it a hybrid in person? Is it an office that's got like ping pong tables and beanbag chairs, or is it pretty much like you come to work, you do your work, and then you go home? Like, what is the type of culture you would be interested in pursuing? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more about that. But to transition, I love to ask the question around how to set expectations at work, or really how to communicate my personal aspirations and goals to my manager, but not in a demanding way, but in a respectful way. Like, how can I go about communicating where I would like to be and learning about opportunities of where I could potentially fulfill responsibilities that help me get there within this organization, but not being like, hey, I demand to be in a higher level role and bonus or whatever. But like, how can I respectfully broach that conversation?
You touched on a big problem in a lot of professional services. They don't have clear paths of advancement for their employees. They'll sit there and just work and expect to be working in that same role, and eventually they get a raise or they move up with some unknown criteria. And so it's really about defining that criteria. Get feedback. Hey, boss or manager or mentor or trainer, can I have feedback as to how I'm doing? Ask for that. Hopefully we're doing, a lot of firms are starting to do 360 reviews, monthly one-on-ones, these kinds of feedback mechanisms, but you might want to initiate those yourself. Finding out what they find to be important can start the conversation. You don't want to come in and say, hey, I need a raise. I'm a stud. I need to get this, I need this raise, but or this new position, or I deserve to manage projects. We don't even know what the criteria are half the time. So just say, hey, I think I'm really doing well, or I know I've had some challenges. I'd love to talk to you about some of these things. Like, what do you feel is important? If you had to build the ideal employee, what would that look like? What would they do? How would they act? What jobs would they take on? What responsibilities? Hey, if I wanted your job, I know that sounds weird, and you got promoted and I wanted to be a prime candidate for your job, how would I go about do that? What would I need to take on? Are there any responsibilities I can take on from you?
That's a powerful question. That's it. You just hit the gold right there, Russell. I love that question. If God forbid you were to be promoted, and if hypothetically I were to be able to take on your position, what type of roles and responsibilities would I be taking on, and what kind of roles and responsibilities could I potentially add to my plate that could potentially put me in a strong position to just make a bigger impact at this company and organization? Not to say I'm gunning for your role by any means, but just to say I'd love to be able to help out in some form or fashion. I think that's a really powerful question, because it shows that you're eager, you're willing, and you're hungry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of people say when you're looking at advancement, the boss will ask the person who wants advancement, well, what are you going to do additional? Or if we hire somebody underneath you, what are you going to do now? And it's like, whoa. It's not about what I'm going to do more of. It's like, what am I not going to do anymore? And that's really what you should focus on. What is this? What activities are you not going to do because somebody else is taking those on? And that leaves a lot of room for growth, for expansion. If it's so linear that we can't, if it's just very cut and dry, it's very hard to advance in those scenarios. You have to meet so many different metrics. But if you can find employers and a culture that encourages you to have open space in your schedule for exploration, for growth, not just professional development, but just to sit and think. I mean, a lot of times firms devalue the time spent thinking. They want you working all the time. And if you sit back and think, and you got to be careful, we talked about perception, you got to sit back and think, what am I doing? What's the next step? And if you don't have any free time to do that, it's really hard to think with these thoughts we're talking. How am I going to go get feedback? I don't even have time to think about what I'm doing in my job. And so by asking your superiors how you can alleviate pressure from them by taking on some of the responsibilities or learning some of the responsibilities, it's both helpful to them to get their jobs done better. You're taking off pressure, showing value for yourself. You're learning the tools of the trade that you need to have to move in your career. And you have that positive outlook. Just be careful and communicate. Again, ask for that feedback. That's how you start it. If you don't proactively message, hey, before I kick off on any project, I really need, my method of operating is to spend like 10 minutes just thinking about the project, getting my arms around it holistically, how I'm going to approach. And I found that's productive. And if you have those proactive conversations with your supervisor, you're going to find a lot more success, and you're going to be perceived as not sitting around closing your eyes at the desk, but you're going to be perceived, oh, he's thinking how he can better serve the company. Or I give him a task and he needs to actually look at that task and take time to do it. And so just having that proactive communication with your supervisors and your colleagues so that you know what opportunities are available, what skills are needed at the higher levels will help you tremendously in your career.
And do you give your employees some time for meditation and just self-reflection while they're at work?
I tell them we are pretty much fully remote, so it's a lot easier. But they'll text me and say, "Hey, it's 9 o'clock. I didn't sleep well last night or whatever." I said, "Well, yeah, you're not going to be productive. Just sit. Tell me when you're ready to go, and let's talk about what they have." When I look at we do a lot of RFPs. We respond to RFPs, and the first thing,
by the way, students, that's requests for proposals.
Oh yeah, I guess I need to do that. Or request for qualifications. Like, this is what an owner will put out when they're looking for an engineering or architecture or construction firm to provide their services. And they'll request these from a bunch of different people. They're bidding on items. Well, the first thing you do when you're coming into a new company, that we don't work for these companies, we just do the proposals for them. The first thing you have to do is stop and you reflect on what the content that you have in front of you that they've done in the past. You learn about and you just research the company you're looking at just to get your head holistically around what they do, because you're trying to craft a message. Hey, again, we'll go back to lessons learned. What's the culture of the company? What lessons have we learned that apply to this project that we can be specific about? If I take that down and I take that same mentality and I put it onto an employee, I say, okay, employee, stop. Look at your company culture, look at the projects that are done, look what your colleagues have done. We talked about this before. Look around you when you're an imposter to see what other people are doing, to see if you're doing that same thing. But take a moment, digest that. Look at the lessons learned that we've talked about earlier and the solutions you've had, and apply those to the next project you have or the next task. And then review that with your manager or your supervisor. Same thing we just talked about. Go to the feedback cycle and then say, hey, how am I doing? Is this good? And that opens the door for you to ask, what can I do more? How can I improve? How can I take pressure off of you? How would I do your job? And it all comes full circle. I mean, it's the same methods for every question, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love to, now that we've kind of covered this, what is a go-to question that you want to ask your boss? Students, just post in the comment section. I'd love to learn your thoughts on this. Like, when you get into your first job or internship or your next job or internship, post in the comment section, what is the question that you're going to ask your boss to kind of help give you additional responsibilities and show that you're interested and eager to step up for them? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more about that. So Russell, I'd love to just kind of conclude this workshop just with just final keynotes of what students can do to prepare for that first job or internship. Are there any key things that you've started observing, maybe some students or recent grads are missing when it comes to that first job or internship that if they could do that would really set themselves above and beyond any other student?
I hate to say it, but hygiene is probably one of, you come out of college and there's you can roll into class any way, shape, or form. You've been out all night, maybe you haven't been out all night, but you come to class in varying states. When you get to a job, and you're in there, look at the culture, ask the questions in advance about how should I dress for my first day, what should I wear, what should I be doing, ask about the day. Some people won't give it to you, some will. The other thing is, about appearance. I hate to say boogies in a professional sense, but check yourself. Look and see if you've got some hangers on or anything going on. Just anything you can do to be perceived as a engaged, capable, working adult will help, because that's the biggest stigma you have to overcome, I think, as you step into a new job, is you're the new guy and you don't know what you're doing. And anything you can do to kind of calm yourself, be professional, be presentable is a benefit. And the other thing is just, again, ask those questions. Don't be afraid to fail. Ask the questions to get clarity on your task before you start. And during the process, ask questions if you're unsure. And if you're really confident, maybe you should probably ask a question anyway, because if you're that confident about it and they don't, this is your first task, asking a question at that point to make sure you're on the right track can really show that you're giving thought and care to your work and not just blowing through it. So really just ask those questions and be presentable when you get there. You're new.
I love that. Students, I'd love to know, what's a go-to question you want to ask your boss or employer when you're in your first job? There's just your go-to. Like, if you don't know if you've got any questions, but it's going to be your go-to anyways, post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. Well, Russell, this has been great. This has been a really awesome workshop. I feel like we've covered some really great points here about what students can do to prepare for that first job or internship. My last question is, how can our students learn more about you and your work? Are you okay with them connecting with you on LinkedIn?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm in Vancouver, Washington. We went to, which is right by Portland, for anybody who needs to know. We have some colleges up here, and they send the students from the engineering schools up and around to the various firms that I work with. And, they're often sitting there and they don't know how to reach out. They don't know how to talk to people. And I give them my card and tell them to come over and talk to me, and we'll see if we can connect you with the right people, because you need to network. There are tons of firms right now. I mean, it is a good time to be an employee looking for work. And so there are good firms. If you have a firm that needs help in the culture department, or you think that you need a firm that fits your personality better, there's lots of people around. If you have questions about how to talk to people, what to